Story 1. My friend's boyfriend scared her as a prank. She sought revenge by waiting for him to fall asleep, and then watched a bunch of videos he would hate on his YouTube account to mess with his recommended algorithm. Story 2. I put the dongle of a wireless mouse into the back of my coworker's computer. Whenever I feel like messing with him, I just open my desk drawer and take over his computer. Story 3. It was only a few weeks, but a supervisor on a construction site where I worked was complaining about the birds in front of his office. That night, I went to a pet shop and bought a big bag of birdseed. I hid it nearby, and when the coast was clear, I would scatter a couple of handfuls. It took a few days, but more and more birds started stopping by to look for food. There were over 30 pigeons out there one morning when he came in. I let him in on what I was doing one day when he had pretty much given up and was throwing old bread out for the birds. He later asked me to pick up another bag of seed, as he had taken over throwing out seed and ran out. Story 4. Back in the day, I used to cold call in an unpleasant sales job, and eventually I got bored. When I would ask for Mr. Smith, and they would say he's not here, can I take a message? I used to leave messages. Tell him he was right. It's not going to fit. Or, tell him it'll have to be the blue one. The red one isn't available. Or, we can't do 7 o'clock because the cat isn't well. If they queried it any further, and they usually didn't, I'd say he will know what it means. I like to think I've left a legacy of people scratching their heads for days. Story 5. Put a single grain of rice on something that belongs to them every day when they are not looking. In a shoe, a pocket, on top of their bag at work, on their desk. Always rice, always a different place. Story 6. One of my best friends was working as a section manager in a retail store. He bought a box of like 400 rubber duckies off Amazon and started leaving a single one on his boss's desk at random times. Never said a word to her about it and would pick odd times to do it to throw her off the scent. Like if he came on an off day to shop, he'd sneak one in. He'd come in 30 minutes before his shift started to do it. He'd stay late to do it. He did this for at least 6 months before he got promoted and got a transfer. On his last day of work, he walked into her office with the box of the rest and turned them upside down on her desk. She hit something like a combo of hysterical laughter and sobbing, "Oh my God, I thought I was going insane." Story 7. 1. When I was a kid in the 1980s, my neighbor used to go on vacation for 2 weeks every year during the summer. He relied on his friend, my dad, to get his mail and check on his house, which my dad did. My neighbor loved elaborate Christmas lights all over his entire house, and that took a lot of work. So he left them up all year and only turned them on at Christmas time. For 2 weeks of the summer, my dad would turn his friend's Christmas lights on, but no one else in the neighborhood knew what was going on. Every once in a while, someone in the neighborhood would mention it, and he would act all confused because he was. 2. My grandpa used to work with a guy during the 1960s who used to brag about gas mileage. His whole office would pitch in and buy gas, siphoning it into his car so his gas would last way longer than it should, like weeks. He would come in, brag about it, and everyone would laugh. Story 8. One time, my friend Steve was at my house, and the phone rang. The caller ID showed his number, so I knew it had to be his roommate, probably looking for him. I picked up the receiver and immediately asked, "Hi, is Steve there?" There was a pause. Then, no, he's out. Just as quickly, I said, "Cool. I'll try again later. Bye," and hung up. It was probably a good minute before she called back to call me a bastard. Story 9. Working from a shared work computer. I frequently changed a coworker's email signature to absolutely random quotes completely unrelated to anything to do at work. He would never notice, and it was a constant topic of conversation about what Kyle had added to his email this week. Story 10. I put one of those electronic cricket circuits above the false ceiling in my old boss's office. Every so often, it would chirp. It drove him mad. He never did find it. Story 11. Just hand them stuff and say, "Hey, can you hold this for me?" They will almost every time and then just never ask for it back and see how long they keep it. Story 12. My colleague went on a bachelor party with a friend of mine. Absolutely nothing happened. My friend said it was very tame and without controversy. Anyway, upon his return, he walked past me and I said, I heard what happened at the bachelor party. He immediately went bright red and said, "What have you heard?" I simply replied, "Don't worry, your secret is safe with me," and went on with my day. He has spent the last week demanding to know what I know while going up to colleagues and asking if they had heard me say anything. Further context. I'm known as the quiet one in the office, which made it much more believable. Story 13. I used to work for a difficult boss who demanded a conference call every Monday at 8 a.m. with around 50 people on the call. He would yell and belittle everyone about how incompetent we all were. We never found out who, but someone bought a cheap gag gift that would say, "Forget you," when you press the button. They started using it every week on the call, and it drove the boss crazy. He made a huge diagram on a whiteboard tracking who was on the call each week and who was on vacation. It went on for over a year, and he never was able to figure out who it was. Story 14. This is oddly specific but funny. When I was in college, all the theater kids went abroad to London, almost as a tradition. I didn't go anywhere because I didn't have the money, but one of the theater kids, who was a friendly rival of mine, went to France. While he was gone, I just kept telling people he was in London. At first, they questioned it, but I just kept driving it home. By the time he got back, everyone kept asking him how London was. After 4 months of that, he got really sick of it. And then I photoshopped him into some of the London photos and submitted them to the school study abroad photo contest and got them on the university's website. It was a great long-term prank. Story 15. My manager, who was very relaxed, had his desk at the back. I noticed once when he was showing me something on his phone, he always had near-field communication turned on. He also had a habit of placing his phone on one particular spot on his desk when working. I had a few of these white near-field communication stickers, basically just a little chip in a small white sticker that mobile phones read when placed over or near it, similar technology to contactless payment. You could program the chip to perform actions on the phone. I placed a few in the spot where he usually placed his phone. Since the stickers were white, they blended in perfectly with his desk. I programmed the sticker to open YouTube on his phone and play a specific meme or humorous video of my choosing, which would happen daily, so much so that he thought his phone was faulty and reset it. Yet the problem still persisted. He was so confused. I eventually confessed my actions, and he thought it was hilarious. It then became a routine to set his quick response code to a new meme every day when he was away from his desk. Here's an example of the type of content I'd assign to the near-field communication sticker. Too long. Didn't read. Hidden near-field communication tags linking to silly things when accidentally scanned are great for playing harmless tricks on someone. Story 16. A few months ago, I met one of my neighbors. She told me her and her husband's names. I've seen them around, so I know who her husband is. A few days ago, I'm outside and see him coming the other way. I smile and wave, "Hi, Bob," as if I've known him for years. He says hi back like he just can't remember my name right now. That's going to be a slow burn. I am very distinctive looking, so pretty quickly, he'll be thinking, surely I'd remember meeting a 3-foot-tall black woman with green spiky hair. Story 17. Buy a super small Bluetooth speaker and hide it in a false ceiling. Every so often, you can play any sound you want. My personal choice was Yiddish prayers. Story 18. My old boss bought a new Harley-Davidson one summer. No matter where he parked, I would put about a tablespoon of oil under it. He ended up taking it back to the dealer twice before he got himself ejected and banned. Story 19. Move something slightly out of place every time you are around them, like tilting a picture frame or adjusting a chair. They will start questioning their sanity. Story 20. Screenshot their computer desktop. Close all the open windows and move the cursor off screen. Print screen and save the image to the desktop. Remove all the desktop items and taskbar. Set the screenshot as the desktop background. Story 21. While talking to someone, stare behind them for some time. It's almost guaranteed that they will also look back. Do this every day without them noticing that you are doing it on purpose. And if they ask what's up, then shrug it off saying you were just distracted. Story 22. Way back in the days before televisions would display every little thing, you could change the volume and brightness without it registering on the screen. My friend and I would take the remote while his little brother was watching the television and very slowly turn down the brightness, like one click of the button every 30 seconds. Eventually, it was nearly black, and he could never figure out what was going on. We would claim that we could see the television fine. Story 23. If you know your neighbor has an Amazon Alexa, wait until you know that they are out, then shout through their letterbox. Amazon Alexa, set alarm for 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, then other random alarms and reminders. Use an old Wi-Fi router in your car and name it Surveillance Van Number 2, then park it in a public car park. Story 24. At work, I got into the habit of making a loud clap when I turned off my machine to go to lunch. One day, I did it just because I turned off my machine. I heard a dude's stomach growl. Story 25. 6 months after we broke up, I realized somehow my Spotify account was still connected to my ex's Amazon Alexa. So now, sometimes at 5 a.m., I accidentally on purpose connect to it and play top 50 most annoying songs of all time. I see the song stop, and then I press play again. We do a back and forth until he gives up. That's what you get when you cheat on your flight instructor. Brent. Story 26. During my first semester at college, my roommate always had girls over in our single-room dorm, forcing me to sleep in the common area and shower at the gym. As revenge, I started putting a Jolly Rancher candy inside our bathroom shower head. Every morning, they would shower together, but when rinsing off in the shower, they would be left with a thin layer of sugar on their skin and in their hair. The girls stopped coming over because they all felt sticky and gross throughout the day, leading them to attribute that unclean feeling to my roommate. By the beginning of the second semester, he could not get a date, which was 99% of the reason he was in college, so he dropped out. I had the dorm room to myself for the rest of the year. The first change I made was removing the remains of the Jolly Rancher from the shower head. Story 27. During the Cold War, the East German State Security Police, also known as the State Security Service, would monitor suspected dissidents and enemy agents. They would place bugs in their apartments, and when they were out, they would rearrange things. Maybe hide things, maybe just move them around a bit. Nothing huge. The suspects wouldn't come home to find the place trashed as if it had been searched for clues. But things would be different. The feeling of being watched and messed with would grow over time until the suspect couldn't sleep, couldn't operate normally, utterly paranoid, not knowing who was an informant, who might be an agent. Story 28. If you know someone with a dual-control electric blanket, switch the bottom plugs around. Mom was cold, so she would turn hers up a number, which made Dad hot, so he turned his down one. It took them about 3 nights to figure it out. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Story 29. At an old office job, we played a prank on an older colleague who wasn't very tech-savvy by changing the speed of his mouse to be really slow. He was getting quite frustrated that he had to scroll so much just to barely move his cursor on the screen. We casually suggested that perhaps his mouse was dirty and that he should clean it. He cleaned it with an electronics duster spray, and when he left to put the spray back, we set the mouse sensitivity to high. When he came back, his reaction was so funny that we were physically hurting from trying not to laugh. Story 30. Change their autocorrect so every time they type yes, it automatically changes to yeehaw. Nothing like turning someone into a cowboy without them knowing it. Story 31. Be very nice to them always. I was a direct store delivery driver. Many of the items you see at the supermarket are direct store delivery, not stocked by the store. For example, Coke, Nabisco, Hallmark, all stocked by the vendor. We have to deal with receivers at the loading dock. Receivers, in some cases, are trained to be unfriendly with vendors, be suspicious of vendors' short stocking, etc. One receiver was harsh with me each time I delivered. He'd berate me, insult me, and yell, but I noticed that he did it to all vendors. So I indulged him, always smiled, never yelled back, took all his insults. After all, I was only there for a half hour once a week. Finally, after a year, with no one on the dock but the two of us, he approached me and asked, "Why are you always smiling, never shout back? Take all the stuff I give to you and never get upset? What is wrong with you?" I replied in a soft monotone voice, inches from his face with a look that was clearly trying to restrain anger. "I'm sorry that I am upsetting you. Please understand that it is not my intent. My therapist and I have worked out strategies for times like these so that I do not act out on my inner emotions and get in trouble again. I hope you understand. And I walked out. He never messed with me again. Story 32. I'm a teacher. I like to make that little water droplet sound by flicking my cheek and whistling outward as I do it. My younger kids always ask, "What was that noise?" And I always say, "I don't know. I didn't hear anything." A few I've had for years, and they still haven't figured it out. I just keep gaslighting these children. I get paid for this. Story 33. My brother-in-law upset my younger sister. My older sister decided to teach him a lesson. For the next several months, he began receiving the most random items via the United States Postal Service with no return address, no letter, no explanation. What was sent? Sawdust, pocket lint, acorns, twigs, leaves, sand, among a dozen other harmless items. The kicker? My sister did not send all of these items from one location, or even just herself. She got her friends and close colleagues involved. Due to the nature of her circle, the postmarks originated from locations across the United States. He received random items from something like 28 different states and Canada. Eventually, he started to freak out and wanted to call the police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation before they finally told him. My brother-in-law learned to compromise on home decor decisions going forward.